Hey there, readers. Welcome back. I hope you're having an awesome day because today I've got a wild ride of a story for you. This one is about a relentless HOA president. We'll call her Karen for obvious reasons, and her misguided crusade against a resident's rights. Spoiler alert. Justice is served, but not before some serious drama. Let's rewind to October, when I was minding my own business as usual. I own a townhouse in an upscale development, a prime spot I invested in about 3 years ago. What makes my property unique is that it's one of the original 12 units built before the HOA was formed. These townhouses came with grandfathered rights, meaning we can use the community amenities, like the gym, pool, and clubhouse, without paying HOA fees. This was all laid out in the property deed and original planning documents. For years, everything was peaceful. I rented out my townhouse, and I'd occasionally use the gym when checking on my tenants. Life was good. Then Karen entered the scene. Karen was elected HOA president about 6 months ago, and boy, did she make an impression. My first run-in with her happened on a quiet October evening. I'd just started my workout at the community gym when the door slammed open, and in walked Karen, clipboard in hand, exuding full Karen energy. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This facility is for HOA members only." I paused my treadmill, raised an eyebrow, and replied, "Actually, I own Unit 127. My property has grandfathered rights to use these amenities." Karen's face tightened like a rubber band about to snap. "I've never heard of that. What's your name?" I explained the situation calmly, even offering to show her the deed on my phone. But Karen was having none of it. "Well, I'm the HOA president, and you'll need to leave immediately, or I'll call security," she barked. Now, I'm not one to back down, especially when I know I'm in the right. "Feel free to check the records," I said. "I'm finishing my workout." She stormed out, but I knew this wasn't over. Over the following weeks, Karen's antics shifted into high gear, and it started to feel personal. The first blow came when she changed the entry code to the gym. I only found out after being locked out one evening, standing there with my gym bag in hand, feeling a mix of confusion and frustration. When I reached out to her, she gave me the new code with an air of annoyance, as if she were doing me a favor. But I knew better. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was deliberate. That small act of defiance stung more than I expected. It wasn't about the inconvenience of missing a workout, it was the principle of it. I'd fought hard to prove my rights, and here she was, quietly trying to chip away at them. It felt like an attack, not just on my access to the gym, but on my very presence in the community. Then came the notes. Every time I parked near the gym, I'd return to my car to find a scrap of paper tucked under the wiper. The messages were annoyingly polite, but dripping with passive aggression. "Please be mindful of HOA parking regulations," or "This area is reserved for authorized members." Each note was a jab, a reminder that Karen wasn't going to let this go. I kept every single one of those notes, stashing them in a folder that grew thicker by the week. They were proof of her harassment, yes, but they also felt like tiny victories. With each note, I became more determined not to back down. I could feel the tension building, the pressure mounting, and deep down I knew this wasn't just about parking or gym codes. Karen was gearing up for something bigger, and I had to be ready. One evening, I was at the gym doing my usual workout when Karen waltzed in with 2 police officers in tow. "That's him," she said triumphantly, pointing at me like I was a criminal. "He's trespassing and refusing to leave." The officers approached me, professional but firm. "Sir, we've received a complaint that you're not authorized to be here." Remaining calm, I pulled up the documentation on my phone. "I own Unit 127. My property has deeded rights to use these facilities. Here's the proof." One officer reviewed the documents while Karen hovered behind him, arms crossed and face red. "Ma'am," the officer finally said, "this appears to be a civil matter. The documentation clearly shows he has a legal right to be here. We can't remove him." Karen's face turned a shade of red I didn't know was possible. "But he's not an HOA member. He doesn't pay fees." "That's because my property predates the HOA, I explained. "These rights were preserved when the HOA was formed. My lawyer has already sent letters explaining this." The officers apologized for the disturbance and left. Karen stormed out, but not before muttering, "This isn't over." Karen was right. It wasn't over. The next day, my lawyer filed a formal complaint against the HOA for harassment and violation of property rights. As it turned out, I wasn't the only one Karen had been targeting. After reaching out to other owners of pre-HOA properties, I discovered that 5 others had similar stories. Together, we turned my complaint into a much bigger legal issue. The HOA's lawyers quickly realized Karen had put them in a legally indefensible position. During negotiations, we learned that she'd ignored warnings from the HOA's own legal counsel about our rights. But wait, it gets better. During the investigation, a bombshell revelation surfaced. Karen had been misusing HOA funds for personal expenses. She had been charging for things like personal training sessions under the guise of facility maintenance. When this came to light, it felt like vindication for everyone she had wronged. The board members, who had once stood by her, were furious. Watching their faces shift from disbelief to outrage felt like seeing justice bloom before my eyes. Karen, the once untouchable queen of the HOA, was forced to resign in disgrace, her carefully curated reputation shattered. For me, the moment was bittersweet. There was satisfaction in knowing that her misdeeds had finally caught up with her, but there was also a lingering sadness. How did it come to this? A neighborhood is supposed to be a community, a place where people support each other. Instead, Karen had turned it into a battleground, fueled by her ego and need for control. As I reflected on everything, a part of me felt sorry for her, not for the consequences she faced, those were well-deserved, but for the emptiness she must have felt to act this way in the first place. Now, with Karen gone, life in the neighborhood feels lighter. My gym routine, once a source of stress and conflict, is now completely hassle-free. The new HOA board has been a breath of fresh air, professional, transparent, and genuinely committed to rebuilding trust. They even hosted a community event to mend relationships, and for the first time in years, people seemed happy to gather and celebrate together. Standing there, watching neighbors laugh and connect, I felt a sense of hope. Maybe we could finally move forward. This ordeal taught me more than just the importance of standing up for my rights. It taught me resilience. There were moments when it would have been easier to give up, to let Karen win, but I didn't. Sometimes doing what's right means enduring the drama and the discomfort. It means holding your ground even when the odds feel stacked against you. In the end, justice prevailed, not just for me, but for the community as a whole, and that, more than anything, made the struggle worth it. Just when I thought my battle with HOA Karen was over, life threw another curveball my way. After securing my gym rights and watching Karen resign in disgrace, I figured I could finally enjoy some peace. Little did I know, her reign of terror wasn't over, it was just shifting gears. This time, Karen wasn't targeting my gym routine. No, she had set her sights on my pride and joy, my café. And trust me, the drama that unfolded was steaming hot. Let me take you back for a moment. Owning a townhouse in the neighborhood wasn't just about having a place to call home. It was part of a bigger dream. You see, a few years ago, I decided to take a leap of faith and chase a long-held passion. I opened a cozy little cafe just a block away, pouring my heart and soul into every detail. From the warm, inviting atmosphere to the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air, it was everything I'd envisioned. This wasn't just a business to me, it was a piece of who I was. I wore many hats, owner, barista, and sometimes even handyman when things broke down. I loved every minute of it. The early mornings spent perfecting the pastries, the smiles on customers' faces as they took their first sip of coffee, and the conversations that turned strangers into friends. It wasn't just a cafe, it was a community, a place where people came to feel at home. Running the cafe wasn't always easy. There were days when exhaustion tugged at my sleeves and moments when I wondered if I'd taken on more than I could handle. But those doubts always faded the moment someone walked in, sighed contentedly, and said, "This is my favorite spot." Each day, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride knowing I'd created something that brought people joy. Everyone seemed to love it, almost everyone anyway. There was one person who didn't share in the warmth and joy of the cafe, Karen. From the moment she set her sights on me, it became clear that no amount of kindness, coffee, or community spirit could change her mind. For Karen, my little slice of heaven was nothing more than a thorn in her side, and that, my friends, is where the trouble began. The trouble started about 2 months after her dramatic resignation from the HOA board. I was wiping down tables one busy Saturday morning when Karen strolled in, her expression radiating disapproval. "Hello, Karen," I said, forcing a polite smile. "What can I get you?" She didn't bother with pleasantries. "This establishment violates multiple HOA regulations," she announced loudly, drawing the attention of nearby customers. I blinked. "Karen, this cafe isn't even in the HOA's jurisdiction. It's a commercial property." Karen ignored me, pointing at the cafe's charming outdoor seating area. "Those tables encroach on community space. I'll be filing a complaint." I should have laughed it off, but knowing Karen, I had a feeling she wasn't bluffing. And sure enough, the very next day, I received a letter from the HOA citing a list of supposed violations, none of which applied to my business. Karen wasn't content with just letters. She escalated by reporting me to the city's code enforcement department. One sunny afternoon, a city inspector showed up unannounced. "Sorry to bother you," he said, clipboard in hand. "We received a report about unauthorized structures and zoning violations." I sighed, already guessing who was behind it. "By any chance, did the complaint come from someone named Karen?" The inspector chuckled. "I'm not at liberty to say, but let's just say you're not the first business she's targeted." Luckily, I had all my permits and paperwork in order. After a quick inspection, the officer gave me the all clear, but Karen wasn't done yet. Her next move, noise complaints. She started calling the city, claiming the cafe's music and outdoor conversations were a nuisance. One evening, a police officer showed up just as we were closing. "We've had multiple complaints about excessive noise," he said apologetically. I gestured to the nearly empty cafe. "We're not even playing music right now." The officer nodded. "Honestly, it doesn't seem like there's a problem, but we have to follow up." I knew this was another one of Karen's stunts, so I filed my own complaint against her for harassment. The final straw came when Karen tried to organize a neighborhood petition to have my cafe shut down. She went door to door, spreading lies about my business being an eyesore and a disruption to the community. What she didn't realize was that many of my customers were also her neighbors, and they loved the cafe. Word got back to me, and I decided to fight back in the most public way possible. I organized a Customer Appreciation Day to celebrate the cafe's success and thank the community for their support. We offered free coffee, live music, and a pop-up market featuring local artisans. To my surprise, nearly the entire neighborhood showed up, including several former HOA board members who were eager to share their own Karen horror stories. Karen, of course, couldn't resist making an appearance. She stood on the sidelines, arms crossed, glaring at the festivities. At one point, she tried to confront me, but a group of regulars intercepted her. "Karen, maybe you should just let it go," one of them said with a smirk. "Clearly the community loves this place." She stormed off, but the damage to her reputation was already done. Here's the kicker. A week after the event, I received an official apology from the city for the unnecessary inspections and noise complaints. They also sent Karen a cease and desist letter, warning her against filing frivolous complaints. The best part? The cafe's popularity skyrocketed after all the drama. People came in just to hear the story of how we stood up to Karen. I thought that was the end of my Karen saga, but oh, how wrong I was. Just as I was getting back into the swing of things at the cafe, I heard whispers about a new controversy brewing in the neighborhood. This time, Karen was targeting someone else, a kind-hearted woman named May. It seemed Karen hadn't learned her lesson, and once again, I found myself caught in the middle of the drama. After the chaos of my cafe showdown with Karen finally settled, I thought we could all breathe a little easier. It felt like a weight had been lifted. Our neighborhood could return to its peaceful rhythm. But peace is a fragile thing, and Karen, as it seemed, wasn't done stirring the pot. Her next target was May, one of the kindest, most genuine people I'd ever met. May had poured her heart into transforming her front yard into something magical, a pet care business she lovingly named Happy Paws Haven. It was more than just a business. It was an oasis. The fenced yard was filled with colorful shade canopies, squeaky toys, and even a tiny doggy obstacle course. Every detail felt intentional, as if May had imagined the happiest possible place for pets and made it real. And it worked. Local pet owners couldn't stop raving about her. Dogs wagged their tails with excitement as soon as they neared her place, and their owners beamed with gratitude. You could see the pride in May's eyes, the kind of pride that comes from turning a dream into a reality. But not everyone saw it that way. Karen, with her ever-watchful glare, looked at May's little paradise as something entirely different. To her, it wasn't a safe haven for pets or a testament to hard work. It was an eyesore, a disruption, something to be dealt with. Karen's complaints were more than just words. They were sharp daggers, aimed directly at May's hopes. I couldn't help but feel a pit in my stomach as I watched it unfold. May didn't deserve this. She'd brought joy to so many people, but here was Karen, ready to tear it down. I wondered how May was holding up, if the whispers and passive-aggressive comments were keeping her up at night. I thought about how hard it must be to stand tall when someone's trying so hard to knock you down. And if I was being honest, I felt guilty too. Guilty for not standing up sooner, for not finding a way to protect May from Karen's storm. Karen's issue with May's pet care business wasn't about noise or aesthetics, at least not on the surface. She claimed it violated HOA rules, even though May's property, like mine, was part of the original pre-HOA units with grandfathered rights. Karen's real problem became clear during a neighborhood meeting when she said, "This is a residential neighborhood. We don't need businesses like this lowering our property values." The emphasis she put on businesses like this didn't sit right with anyone. Still, May handled it with grace, calmly explaining that her business was perfectly legal and that she'd followed all city regulations. But Karen wasn't satisfied. A week later, Karen started a petition to shut down Happy Paws Haven. She went door to door, armed with a clipboard and a forced smile. Her pitch? May's pet care business was noisy, unsanitary, and a nuisance to the neighborhood. The truth? May kept everything spotless, and the dogs were always well behaved. Most of the neighbors knew this and refused to sign the petition, but Karen wasn't above twisting the facts. She claimed that May's business attracted outsiders to the neighborhood, implying that it wasn't safe. Sadly, a few people bought into her fear-mongering. As Karen's campaign gained traction, May felt like the walls were closing in around her. Each day brought new whispers of discontent, anonymous complaints piling up like a weight on her chest. The knock at her door from a city inspector was the final blow to her fragile sense of peace. She stood frozen, heart pounding, as they combed through her property, clipboard in hand. Though they found no violations, the experience left her trembling, her mind swirling with doubts. Was she doing something wrong? Was she failing the people and pets she cared so deeply about? That evening, May sat across from me, her hands gripping her teacup as if it might anchor her to the moment. Her voice wavered and her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. "I just want to help," she said, her words heavy with exhaustion. "Why is she doing this to me? To us?" There was a vulnerability in her tone that broke my heart, a raw plea for understanding, for answers that wouldn't come. I searched for words that might soothe her, but the truth was hard to face. How could I promise her that things would get better when Karen seemed relentless in her pursuit? May's hurt was palpable, her passion for her work now overshadowed by the creeping dread that it might all slip away. As I held her gaze, I felt a surge of helplessness. May was one of the kindest, most genuine people I knew, and yet she was caught in this storm of unwarranted hostility. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from the negativity, but deep down I knew Karen wouldn't stop until she got her way. And that realization was a weight we both silently carried. The final showdown came during an HOA meeting that Karen called specifically to discuss May's business. May and her supporters showed up in force, ready to defend her. Karen began the meeting with her usual theatrics, waving a stack of printed complaints, likely fabricated, and arguing that Happy Paws Haven was a blight on the neighborhood. May stood up, visibly nervous but determined. I've done everything by the book. My business is licensed, and I followed all regulations. I've even offered to address any concerns directly." Her words were met with applause from the audience, but Karen wasn't moved. She motioned for a vote, claiming that the HOA had the power to enforce zoning rules, even on grandfathered properties. To everyone's shock, the vote passed. Karen had somehow convinced just enough people to side with her. May felt her world crumble as she read the HOA's formal notice. Her hands trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. Happy Paws Haven wasn't just her business. It was her passion, her refuge, and her way of spreading joy. The thought of shutting it down left her heart heavy with despair. She tried to muster the courage to fight back, but the mounting legal fees and the emotional toll soon became unbearable. Each passing day felt like a losing battle, chipping away at her spirit. When the final day came, May stood in her now empty front yard, the silence cutting through her like a knife. Gone were the cheerful barks and wagging tails that once filled the space with life. In their place was a haunting stillness that served as a cruel reminder of Karen's triumph. May felt an ache deep in her chest, not just for herself, but for the neighborhood that had lost something special. Karen, though victorious, was far from celebrated. Her smug demeanor did little to mask the growing resentment from the community. Whispers of disapproval echoed in the cul-de-sacs, and former allies began to avoid her, their smiles replaced with cold glances. Even those who had supported her admitted, often in hushed tones, that they'd been wrong, fooled by Karen's manipulative charm. The neighborhood no longer felt the same, fractured by her actions. For May, however, this painful chapter became a turning point. She found a new space for Happy Paws Haven in a nearby commercial area, and the community rallied around her. Customers, both old and new, admired her strength and determination. As her business thrived in its new location, May realized she hadn't just survived, she had grown. The journey had scarred her, but it also revealed the resilience she never knew she had. Karen's victory over May wasn't just about rules or regulations. It was a stark reminder of the harm a power-hungry individual can cause when left unchecked. While May moved on to bigger and better things, the neighborhood was left divided, and Karen's reputation took another hit. Sometimes, even when the good guys lose, their strength and dignity shine brighter than any victory.